"You are kind," she said, her voice soft. "Few would risk so much." "Yeah, well," Eric said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm not exactly known for my great decision-making, but you looked like you needed help." She stepped closer, her movements fluid and graceful. "You did more than help. You gave me freedom." There was a weight to her words, a depth of emotion that made Eric's chest tighten. He wasn't used to being thanked, especially not like this. "You're welcome," he said, his voice quieter now. "I just couldn't leave you there. It wasn't right." Her glowing eyes seemed to soften, and she reached out, her hand hovering just above his. For a moment, he thought she might actually touch him, but she hesitated, pulling back at the last second. "The sphere," she said, gesturing toward the artifact that now floated between them. "It is a gift, but also a test." Eric frowned. "A test? For what?" "For trust," she said simply. Before he could ask what she meant, the projection began to shift again. The stars around them dimmed, and the shimmering structures faded into darkness. In their place, a new image appeared, a planet bathed in golden light, its surface crisscrossed with rivers of molten silver. "That's your home?" Eric asked, his voice filled with wonder. She nodded. "Erythra," she said. "Once beautiful, now broken." Eric felt a pang of sadness at the sorrow in her voice. "What happened?" "War," she said, her tone heavy. "Greed, fear." The images shifted again, showing scenes of destruction, buildings crumbling, skies darkened by smoke, and figures fleeing in terror. Eric felt a knot form in his stomach as he watched, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'm sorry," he said, the words feeling inadequate. She looked at him, her gaze steady. "Your world is young, but it walks same path." The warning in her tone was clear, and Eric felt a chill run down his spine. "Is that why you're here?" he asked. "To warn us?" "To help," she said. "If you will, listen." Eric opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the projection began to fade. The stars dissolved, the planet disappeared, and he was back in his apartment, the glowing sphere once again resting on the coffee table. Paul was still crouched behind the couch, his eyes wide. What the hell just happened?" Eric didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the sphere, his mind racing with everything he'd just seen and heard. One thing was clear. His life had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. Eric sat in the dim glow of the sphere, his apartment feeling unnaturally silent. Paul had finally left, though not without several parting quips about space girlfriends and alien tech treasure hunts. Normally, Eric would have found Paul's banter annoying, but tonight it had been a welcome distraction from the weight pressing down on his chest. Now, though, he was alone. Just him and the sphere, and the echo of the alien woman's words. "Your world walks the same path." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees and rubbing his temples. How had his life spiraled into this? A week ago, he'd been an overworked, underpaid technician, keeping a low profile at a government facility. Now he was apparently humanity's liaison to a glowing orb of alien technology and a silver-skinned woman from a dying planet. The sphere pulsed softly, as if sensing his thoughts. Eric shot it a wary glance. "What now? You going to lecture me about planetary ethics, too?" The sphere unsurprisingly didn't respond. He sighed and leaned back against the couch. His mind churned with questions. Why had the alien woman chosen him? Surely there were people better equipped to handle something like this. Scientists, world leaders, anyone but him. He was just a guy who fixed broken machinery and occasionally got yelled at for spilling coffee on important documents. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, pulling him out of his thoughts. He grabbed it, half expecting another text from Paul about how alien tech could probably get you rich if you sold it on eBay. But it wasn't Paul. The message was from an unknown number. "They're watching you, be careful." Eric's stomach dropped. He stared at the screen, his pulse racing. Who was this? How did they know about him? About the sphere? His mind jumped to the facility. Had they found out about the escape? Were they tracking him? He glanced nervously at his front door, half expecting a SWAT team to burst in. The phone buzzed again. Don't trust anyone, not even your neighbor. Neighbor? Eric muttered. His eyes darted to the door again, this time with a different kind of dread. Paul was nosy, sure, but he wouldn't, would he? No, it couldn't be Paul. This had to be someone else, someone from the facility, someone who knew what he'd done. His hands trembled as he typed a reply. Who is this? No response. The message hung in the air like a warning, amplifying his paranoia. He set the phone down and stood up, pacing the room. The sphere's glow followed his movements, its gentle pulsing, almost like a heartbeat. Okay, he said aloud, more to himself than to the sphere. Think. If they're watching, that means they know I have you, which means... He trailed off, glancing at the window. The curtains were drawn, but it didn't stop him from feeling exposed. He hurried over and pulled them tighter, then checked the locks on the front door. The sphere hummed louder, drawing his attention. He turned to see it floating a few inches off the table again, its surface shifting with faint, fluid patterns. The same starburst symbol from earlier appeared, glowing faintly. Not now, Eric said, running a hand through his hair. I'm trying to figure out how to not get abducted by shadowy government agents. Can you maybe save the cryptic light shows for later? The symbol pulsed brighter, and the air around him seemed to thrum with energy. Eric froze as a voice filled the room, not the alien woman's voice, but something mechanical, layered, and unfamiliar. Coordinates uploaded. Instructions pending. Eric blinked. Coordinates? What coordinates? Uploaded where? The sphere didn't answer. The starburst symbol faded, leaving him staring at its softly glowing surface. He grabbed his phone again, scrolling through his apps until he found his GPS. Sure enough, a new set of coordinates had appeared in the search bar, as if typed by an invisible hand. The location wasn't far, just outside the city, near an old industrial park that had been abandoned for years. He stared at the map, a sinking feeling in his gut. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good. His phone buzzed again, startling him. Another message from the unknown number. Go, but be ready. He let out a bitter laugh. Be ready for what? Getting ambushed? Kidnapped? Vaporized? The sphere's hum grew louder, almost insistent. Eric stared at it, his mind racing. He didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at him to stay put, to lock the doors and pretend none of this was happening. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the sphere and the alien woman were counting on him. That whatever was waiting at those coordinates was important. Fine, he muttered, grabbing his jacket. But if I get arrested or worse, I'm blaming you. He pointed at the sphere as if it could understand him, then hesitated. What was he supposed to do with it? He couldn't exactly carry a glowing alien artifact through the city without drawing attention. As if sensing his thoughts, the sphere's light dimmed, and its surface shifted, becoming smaller and smoother until it fit neatly in the palm of his hand. Eric stared at it, his jaw slack. Well, that's convenient. He slipped the sphere into his jacket pocket and headed for the door, his heart pounding. The air outside was cool and crisp, the streets quiet as he made his way to his car. He kept his head down, half expecting black SUVs to come screeching around the corner at any moment. The drive to the industrial park was uneventful, but the tension in his chest only grew. The place was even more desolate than he remembered, crumbling buildings, rusting machinery, and weeds growing through cracks in the pavement. He parked his car and stepped out, the sphere in his pocket growing warmer as he approached the coordinates. The location led him to a building at the edge of the park, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. He hesitated at the entrance, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, but the sphere pulsed against his hand, urging him forward. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of rust. Eric's footsteps echoed as he made his way through the dark, empty space, following the faint glow of the sphere in his hand. It led him to a room near the back, its door half hanging off its hinges. He stepped inside and froze. In the center of the room was a device, massive and alien, its surface covered in the same glowing patterns as the sphere. Wires and conduits snaked across the floor, connecting it to what looked like a makeshift power source. And standing next to it, shrouded in shadows, was a figure. Eric's breath caught as the figure stepped into the light, revealing a familiar face. "You," he whispered. The alien woman met his gaze, her luminous eyes filled with a mixture of relief and urgency. "You came," she said softly. Before Eric could respond, the device behind her sprang to life, its glow filling the room with a light that seemed to reach into his very soul. The light from the alien device surged outward, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. Eric instinctively raised his arm to shield his eyes, but the warmth of the light wasn't harsh. It was soothing, like sunlight on a crisp autumn morning. The hum of the machine resonated deep within his chest, a vibration that seemed to harmonize with his heartbeat. The alien woman stepped forward, her silver skin shimmering in the radiance. Her expression was calm, though her luminous eyes carried an intensity that made Eric's pulse quicken. "I didn't think I'd see you again," he said, his voice shaky. "I thought you were gone." She tilted her head slightly, a faint smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I said I would remember you. I do not forget kindness." Her words hit Eric harder than he expected, a warmth spreading in his chest that had nothing to do with the device behind her. For a moment, he almost forgot where they were, almost forgot the cryptic warnings and shadowy threats hanging over his head. But reality came crashing back as the machine's glow pulsed brighter, filling the room with a sense of urgency. "What is this thing?" Eric asked, nodding toward the device. "And why do I get the feeling it's about to change my life again?" The alien woman's expression grew somber. "It is a bridge," she said, "a way to connect my world and yours." Eric frowned, glancing at the intricate patterns etched into the machine's surface. "Connect how?" "Because if you're talking about an alien invasion, I'm going to need a bit more context before I start freaking out." She shook her head. "Not invasion. Understanding. My people. We have watched your world, seen its potential, but also its danger." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, well, we're not exactly known for making the best decisions." "Your kindness," she said, her gaze steady, "is proof that there is hope, that not all paths must lead to destruction." Eric wasn't sure how to respond to that. He wasn't used to being called a beacon of hope. He was just a guy who fixed things and tried to stay out of trouble. But as he looked into her glowing eyes, he realized that she genuinely believed in him, in what he'd done. It was a heavy thing to carry, but somehow it felt right. "So this bridge," he said, gesturing to the device. "What exactly does it do?" "It heals," she said simply. "Not just wounds or sickness. It heals worlds." Eric blinked, trying to process her words. "You're saying this thing can fix what? Our planet? The mess we've made?" She nodded. "If your people are willing to learn, to change." He let out a low whistle, running a hand through his hair. "That's a tall order. Humans aren't exactly great at self-reflection, or teamwork, or not blowing things up." The faint smile returned to her lips. "Then they will need you." Eric froze. "Me? Oh no. No, I'm not qualified for that. I'm just a guy who stumbled into all of this by accident." "Kindness is no accident," she said softly. "And sometimes, the right person is not the one who seeks the role, but the one who chooses to act when it matters." He stared at her, at the quiet conviction in her voice, and felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. It wasn't fair. He didn't ask for this. But deep down he knew she was right. He had a choice to make, and there was only one answer he could live with. "Okay," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do I need to do?" The alien woman reached out, her hand hovering just above his. "The sphere," she said. "It is the key." Eric pulled the glowing orb from his pocket, its warmth familiar against his palm. The patterns on its surface pulsed in time with the machine behind her, as if the two were connected. He held it out to her, but she shook her head. "It must be you," she said. "The bridge will respond to your intent, your choices." "Great," Eric muttered. "No pressure or anything." He stepped closer to the machine, the sphere in his hand growing warmer with each step. The glow of the device seemed to reach for the orb, tendrils of light intertwining with its surface. Eric hesitated, glancing back at the alien woman. "Are you sure this is safe?" he asked. She nodded. "Trust yourself." Taking a deep breath, Eric placed the sphere into the center of the machine. The moment it clicked into place, the entire room lit up with a blinding brilliance. He felt a surge of energy rush through him, a connection to something vast and ancient and incomprehensible. Visions flashed before his eyes, images of Earth and its people, of Erythra and its ruins, of other worlds he couldn't begin to name. He saw the beauty and the chaos, the potential and the destruction, and through it all, he felt a thread of hope, fragile but unbroken. The light began to fade, and the room returned to its dim, dusty state. The sphere remained in the machine, its glow steady and calm. Eric turned to the alien woman, his breath ragged. "Did it work?" he asked. She stepped forward, her gaze full of quiet pride. "You have taken the first step. The rest is up to your people." Eric let out a shaky laugh. No pressure there either. She smiled, and for a moment, the weight on his chest didn't feel so heavy. "You are stronger than you know, Eric." He opened his mouth to respond, but the air around her began to shimmer, her form growing translucent. He took a step forward, panic rising in his chest. "Wait, are you leaving?" "I must," she said, her voice soft and steady. "But the bridge remains. We are not so far apart now." Eric watched as she faded into the light, her luminous eyes the last thing to disappear. The room fell silent, the hum of the machine a quiet reminder of her presence. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the empty space where she'd been. Then he let out a long sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Well," he muttered to himself, "guess I've got some work to do." The sphere pulsed softly, as if in agreement, and for the first time in a long time, Eric felt a spark of something he hadn't realized he was missing. Hope.